and welcome back to Lex Talk Music. Thank you for the amazing response to the third episode, and I hope it continues with all the upcoming episodes, given the interesting people I've planned on featuring here. So today's episode is a little extra special because my guest is someone I've known for a while, and also her work has constantly inspired me to do more. We not only share the same law school, we also share the same passion for the creative industry. Now, without further delay, let me introduce my guest for today's episode. She is the founder of Artistic License, a legal and business consultancy for artists and creative professionals, and has worked with India's most keenly watched independent musicians and illustrators. She is co-creator Contracts for Creators, a digital tool created to empower the creative community in India, and also kickstarted a very interesting project that was featured in some prestigious publications for creative professionals called Coffee for Contracts, which I will let her elaborate on a little more during our chat today. She's been invited to speak at trade markets such as WOMEX, IOMMA, Indie Earth Exchange, as well as the UNESCO Capacity Building Workshop. I've had the pleasure of being acquainted with her for about 15 years now, and I'm so happy to have her with me on today's episode. Welcome to Lex Talk Music, Manojna, and thank you for taking the time out to chat with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sandhya.
How have you been coping with the COVID situation?
Okay. I feel like that's like a big question with like a humble answer. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
To be honest, actually pretty well in the sense that especially personally speaking, I'm speaking to you from my home in Hyderabad, and I shuttle between Hyderabad and Bangalore pretty regularly. But I'm going to say that I'm luckily in Hyderabad because I'm basically here with my family. And, and we're all safe and sound, which is honestly a lot to be thankful for right now.
I know, I completely agree.
Yeah. So I feel like from that side, it's nice to be, in a safe environment. Of course, one has their ups and downs. I think we're all experiencing those ups and downs because it is such a unique, unprecedented situation.
I know. I think we've all been watching so many Hollywood movies and preparing for all these, massive apocalypse, zombie apocalypse, and nothing still prepared us for this, right?
No, absolutely not. My cardio is terrible, so I will not be able to outrun any zombies who, because two schools of thought. If we're looking at the slow-paced zombies, I've got some, I'm okay. But if it's, I'm okay. I'm not set, but I'm okay. But if it's, these like hyper vigilant, hyper aware, zombies, I'm not even gonna, I am going to just, see if they need any legal support. I'm just gonna switch over immediately. But yeah.
I've been binge watching Walking Dead and thinking, okay, maybe I'm honing my survival skills with all of this.
Absolutely. This is exactly what I think we're all like we are consuming, and that's the thing. The media that's being sort of supplied to us also.
I know. Right?
Every other day there's like a new disaster movie. So it's like we're being conditioned to be,
I know.
Yeah,
and I think it's also been, imagine the amount we've consumed in the last 2 months. Imagine if we didn't have a Netflix, if we didn't have access to all this entertainment, how would we have spent time, right? It's just, I'm grateful that we have all of that to watch. So even though it's conditioning us for all of this, but
no, absolutely. I feel like this sort of reminds me of this this tweet that's kind of been, I think it's a tweet, but it's kind of been doing the rounds, became a meme. It's been on Instagram where basically people sort of say that we ought to be thankful to artists and creators right now because they've literally given us the things, the resources, the tools, just to allow us to escape.
I know. Seriously, I was having this discussion the other day as well. The amount of music I've been listening to the last 2 months, the amount of Netflix I have streamed. It's just, I can't imagine a time before all of this.
This is
true. What would we have done?
Absolutely. So definitely art saves the day.
Anyway, So I'm going to dive right in.
Yes, please.
I want, I mean, I'm kind of aware of your journey, but I want the listeners to know a little more about artistic license, how it began, and how it's evolved, and how old you are today in terms of like how many years has it been since artistic license?
Of course, of course. So as of I think sometime last week,
Hmm.
artistic license is 7 years old.
Wow,
So yeah, so my baby is 7 years
I
old.
know.
So yeah, and I think the fact that I've chosen to sort of call it my baby itself is indicative of my relationship with it. It is sort of a practice, I suppose, that I've sort of built with a lot of, again, ups and downs,
Hmm.
and it's very beloved because it has really shaped the kind of person that I am today, because it's
Hmm.
really given me the opportunity to meet so many interesting people
Yeah.
who've just taught me so much, and across disciplines, which is what's been really, really interesting.
Hmm.
Um, so 7 years ago,
Hmm.
um, sitting at a dining table
Okay.
and I was this is dining table in my house somewhere in Bangalore at that
Okay.
point, is pretty much when I pressed publish on this WordPress post, basically. And
Okay.
that's sort of like officially when it just, I sort of declared to the internet that artistic license is here. um, but basically, it all started off honestly as a blog, and it started off as a WordPress blog. And the intention at that point was to create a repository of legal information
Hmm.
that would be accessible to the people who I felt actually needed it. So it was, the whole idea was to create this easy to understand, um, you know, easy to access legal information, copyright information about everything related to the artistic and creative scene, particularly like the independent
Hmm. Hmm.
arts. And it was meant for people who were actually working in this space. So for all the independent artists and musicians and the like. And that's how it started, to be very honest.
Hmm. Hmm.
It started really innocently because I think a week before that is when I sort of woke up. So I'm actually not a very impulsive person, but somehow I seem
I
to have
think the
acted.
best decisions happen
Yeah,
on an impulse too, but
yeah, I
it's
think
all good.
so. I think so
Yeah.
because I mean, I didn't really overthink this. So I think there's a
Hmm.
lot of value in what you just said.
Hmm.
And I literally remember I sort of became very aware of how I wanted to engage with the arts in
Hmm.
a way that also drew on whatever legal experience I had and whatever legal interest I had.
Hmm.
So, of course, the blog started, and then almost, I would say, a month or so into, sort of curating the blog and writing for the blog, is when I increasingly started getting approached by artists who wanted me to help them out with their legal issues.
Okay.
So it all happened rather organically. So I don't think it was unexpected. Now, in retrospect, I feel like it seemed like a good way to start off a consultancy, so to say. But what I really, really liked was that the start was organic, and I feel like the
Yeah.
growth has also been
Okay.
steady and organic for the same reason.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great. I mean, and I like how, it's just something that you went with, your gut and started something which you genuinely believed and you were interested in. And I think those are the best products that come out there. It comes out of passion and true interest.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I understand you have a master's degree in entertainment law from UCLA.
Hmm.
So was that before this happened, right before artistic license? So did that have any impact on your decision to set up artistic license, and what's the difference in approach you have seen in the indie music scene there and here? I think those are two completely separate questions, so you can answer that one after the other.
Thank you. No, but I also understand why sort of one question would flow from the other, because in many ways you are absolutely correct. There was a huge impact. So
Mm,
as you sort of mentioned right now, I did do my master's prior to starting artistic license, and
mm,
in many ways it laid the foundation for all of this even before I was aware of, exactly what was happening. So, I mean, if I were to sort of go back in time, of course, you know this. I graduated from Nalsar,
Yay.
and yay! And of course, following that, I joined a corporate law firm. I sort of spent some time there. I honestly didn't even last like a year. Yeah, it wasn't for me. I
I
realized I
feel
don't
you.
think. Exactly. I feel like I don't have to explain myself to you here, so
Yeah.
you understand. But yeah, I think that over there, honestly, it was just not. It wasn't the right match. And interestingly enough, I think when you are put in situations of discomfort, that's also when you start sort
You
of,
grow.
yeah, exactly, and it was definitely that was exactly what it was for me. So I had always known that I wanted to do a master's. I kind of knew that I wanted to do something in the area of art and music in particular, because I grew up with a lot of love for music. And I think that it was honestly at that point in time that I sort of stumbled on the idea of, oh, okay, entertainment law. And, I mean, I was fortunate enough to be accepted into UCLA Law for their entertainment media and IP program. And it was just life changing in so many ways.
Yeah.
I think it started off, honestly, I mean, of course, like the UCLA law school, and then specifically this program, it has just like an amazing alumni. It has a program that's just so specifically designed to learn about how this industry works. And it's in the heart of Hollywood, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I think as a result, I was sort of introduced to how this works, and then I had the opportunity to start looking at it from the inside out, which was all very overwhelming, to be very
I'm
honest.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, of course, I was sort of like, by this time I definitely had a lot of friends who were already independent artists and musicians back here in India. So I already, I mean, I went there sort of with a lot of at least basic understanding of what was going on.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that just sort of got put into a very different context, based on the kind of teaching, the kind of exposure, the kind of conversations that were happening over there. And honestly, the seed for, I think, artistic license, again, like I said, I think that if you sort of go back in time, you see the patterns.
Yeah.
But at that point, you have no idea. So I think the seed for artistic license was kind of sown when I was in the middle of actually putting together a paper on digital sampling. And and how it sort of works in India and like the Indian electronic music scene. And then, yeah, so
That
I
would
mean,
be interesting.
it definitely was. I still think it's, I don't know if it was like now, especially now when I think back, I don't know how good a paper it was as such, but it was definitely, again, something that is very beloved.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. That's also when I realized that I couldn't find a lot of information. So I ended up finishing the paper because I knew the right people to ask here in India,
Yeah.
And at that point, I remember constantly thinking that if I find it difficult, I mean, I've been to law school once already, it's like we did it already once.
Yeah.
And then, in spite of that, in spite of being, having access to so many resources and tools, I can't find specific information. I just kept thinking, what is going on with the people who are actually in the industry, like who actually need to know what a copyright is. Like, does a musician know what a copyright is?
I know.
Yeah. So I think that seed sort of started there. But I feel like I don't know if I've answered both your questions now, or if I've only just begun.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of leads into the next one in the sense that, so you did have an idea of how the Indian indie scene looked like, and I'm assuming that over there you had access to the indie scene over there. You would have at least had a chance to interact with people who are from the indie scene there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And now, since you've been here for the past 7 years, in comparison to what you saw there and here, what was that difference like?
Mm, right. So I think if we have to sort of understand the difference between the independent music scene in the US and then the independent music scene in India, I mean, I don't think that distinction still holds for now, because I definitely think that artists that we see in the music scene today are a lot more sophisticated and a lot more aware of their rights. And this is true of, regardless of whether you're an established independent musician, so to say, who's
Right.
maybe 2 or 3 EPs down, or you're a student at one of the music schools in the country and you're learning to become a full-time musician, so to say. But I still feel like back then, I feel, and I do think that that's still true. I feel like in the US, the independent music community is just a lot more self-aware. They understand that what they're doing is very legitimate, An independent musician doesn't doubt themselves in terms of, their professional choice as much as I think a lot of us do in the independent music scene here. Yeah. And that's true for all the stakeholders. I think that's true for independent labels. That's true for managers who choose to work with independent artists. And one thing that really stuck out to me even back then, so back like, in the early 2000s, so to say, was that people just were a lot more aware of their rights. They knew what simple things meant. They understood what recoupment was. They understood, they understood the terminology. They understood what it meant to, have a master's, what license it was, and unfortunately, at that time in India, we were still struggling with what is a copyright.
I know.
What do you mean I have a copyright?
I think they still are to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's definitely still there. Exactly. I feel like that's reduced. Like I was mentioning earlier, I definitely think it's reduced in the last 2 to 3 years.
Yes, definitely. There's been an increase in awareness for sure.
Exactly. And that points to an optimistic, future. Like I'm quite the optimist. So I always try to look for.
That's great. We need more optimists in this industry for sure.
I think so. I believe that as well. But yeah, I feel like honestly, that's been like the big difference, And
I think I was also wondering about, the overall. So like, for example, in India, there's like a music industry that revolves around the film industry, and there's a music industry that's outside it completely. So the association of indie with all non-film music, regardless of whether it's associated with a label or not, as opposed to in the States where and indie music means music that is not associated with the label.
Yeah.
Like, because they don't have the culture of like Bollywood music there. So
absolutely, there's no film music. Like there's no music that's made for film as such over there.
It's just like background score where you'll have a Hans Zimmer doing something, but most of the songs are licensed to films, right? So
absolutely.
How do you think? I think that also kind of affects the mentality behind how people perceive indie music here, right? So,
absolutely.
In terms of like remuneration and the kind of success that they have, and because of which it affects the legal rights and everything. So I don't know. I mean, what is in that context? What is the biggest problem that you faced, or that you've come across? As a lawyer supporting indie musicians, and legally speaking and otherwise, and do you think we need a change in this mindset?
So I feel like, I definitely do agree with you in the sense that we do, and I feel like this is something that you completely understand as well, with your background, really, with working with a lot of people in the independent scene. That basically there isn't just one music industry in our country, which is definitely the difference, a big difference, because like you rightly mentioned, in a lot of other countries, the music industry is different from the film industry. But with us here in India, we have like a very strong music industry that's associated with our film industry, whether that's Bollywood or any of its, of course, any of the regional sort of film, industries like your Tollywood and the like as well,
Yeah.
And like you said, there is a distinction between non-film music and film music in India. And as a result, absolutely, there's been a different attitude with which musicians in these two sort of industries are treated. Um, I feel like overarchingly, I feel like it is a bit of a sweeping statement, but I do stand by it to a large extent. I really don't think that a lot of the legal amendments, so to say, that have been made, really stand to benefit independent musicians as such.
Yeah.
Because it's not, they were not really instituted anyway, keeping in mind what independent musicians are encountering.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that it is the thing that nobody really wants to talk about. And there are two reasons for that also, I suppose. I think one, because honestly, we as an independent sector were not very good at finding representation in conversations like this.
Yeah.
And also I think it's, I mean, at the end of the day, we are talking about a different power dynamic as well.
Correct.
I mean, the law is going to be influenced by the more powerful aspect of the industry.
Yeah.
And right now that's what it is. I mean, the movie musicians who work with the movie industry have a different set of interests, and those might be captured a lot more than your non-film sort of independent musicians. I think that's definitely there. Yeah, there's a big difference between the two.
So, going back to what you said about representation, like for example, each of these industries, I know for a fact that Tamil Nadu has a union for cine musicians. So these are all music directors and lyricists. No, I don't think not lyricists, but music directors and sessions artists, basically.
Composers,
so,
I think.
Composers. Composers and sessions artists. So you could be an instrumentalist and also be part of this union.
Absolutely.
Does it make sense to have something like this for indie musicians? And in what context would this union come into play? Like, would it be negotiating with a venue, getting payments done on time, licensing a track to an OTT? Like how? I just want to hear your thoughts on it.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think that, I feel like unionization is a big thing, and honestly, something that if we can, like, if it's done properly, then it can achieve so much, and we've seen that in so many different contexts, especially in the entertainment sector. And I feel like it is a good idea to explore unionization. On what scale is something that we'll have to figure out. But I definitely do think that it makes sense to have, some kind of union or collective for independent artists, because there is a lot of power in collective bargaining and collective representation.
Yeah.
And there's no way we can kid ourselves about that anymore, because I feel like one of the earliest issues that I've sort of found in the independent music scene is that every scene is somehow disconnected to the other. So your scene in Bangalore doesn't know what's happening
in Bombay.
Delhi. Which is like, and Bombay is a completely different creature unto itself, and then and that has, and then Calcutta, like, nobody even sort of like that's
no venues there. Oh, that's the big problem.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Like, when the only time I realized a lot of artists would think about what was happening in a different city is when they were putting a tour together.
Yeah.
And that's the only time when they're like, oh, okay, so can you maybe connect me to these venues, to those venues, etc., etc., And the thing is, I still feel like that, like I said, I feel like that was true for a few years ago. Definitely in the last couple of years, I think, thanks to some good managers and, maybe even a couple of like really, really proactive artists, I feel like we are seeing less of these, and we're seeing more artists who understand that the indie scene is a pan-India scene.
Yeah.
But I still feel like there is a lot more that we can do together, because we're still very disconnected. We still don't know what venues are available, like you mentioned, in a particular city. We don't know the standard rates in specific cities. We don't know the standard rates even in non-live events, and as a result, that leads to a lot of undercutting, a lot of exploitation, because because whoever is sort of working with an independent musician understands that they are probably not part of a community that really talks to each other. So we can really fix that, I feel, with a union. Yeah, but it has to be done properly. That's
definitely, because there's an entire procedure that goes behind even setting up a union.
Absolutely,
I've been approached by a couple of musicians and people who are part of record labels also, even to understand, whether this is something that can be done. And I know that they're interested, and I hope they're listening to this, because this is not something that can happen overnight, but this is something which should be worked on. And
absolutely, especially standardization. Like this. Especially at a time like this. I mean, I feel like this is, especially at a time like this, there's a lot of talk, for instance, because we've been seeing a lot of this, especially outside India. There are a lot of countries that are providing economic stimulus packages even to people, in the arts and culture space. So creative and cultural practitioners also, and there is talk now of, at least there's talk. I don't know what it will lead to, but there's talk about, helping the film industry in India, and exactly, and what I will admire, at least to some extent, about this is that there is a lot of emphasis on, people who are generally known as below the line, right? So a lot of your technicians, exactly, which is all wonderful. If that conversation goes somewhere, that will be lovely. But similarly, if we are in a position to collect ourselves and collect our thoughts also, there is a possibility then for us to sort of put forth our thoughts also in a way that actually makes sense, because I feel like that's the number one issue. We all have problems, there's no doubt about it. We all want to fix those problems, but we lack the structure, I think, which a lot of sort of industry associations have at this point. So we definitely are at a disadvantage there, but one that, like you rightly mentioned, it is necessary to overcome it, but it will take time. But it is possible. That's the thing.
Exactly. It is possible. So, and I think the other thing which I was also, thinking about in terms of this, about the indie industry as such. And now, given that we have, players like CD Baby and Believe having official presence in India, the relevance of record labels to the indie industry specifically. And I know they have to work a lot harder now to prove the value at a certain level. And what are the things that an indie artist, has to look out for when they're looking at associating with the record label, whether it's them approaching the label or vice versa?
So I think that I do agree with you. I think that it is definitely a situation now where a lot of labels are showing, more of an active interest in independent musicians. Again, over there also, it gets a bit more interesting, because now you have independent labels who've also taken the conversation. You have powerful independent labels, like, for example, like an Azadi, who are doing like some really fantastic work, because they are really representing a different subculture, so to say. So I think that again, that's the thing. I feel like the thing about being an independent artist who wants to sign up with a label is that you have to be extremely conscious, I think, about where your rights are going, and like what rights you're willing to sort of give up, because the traditional record deal has always wanted everything. You give us all your rights for like, a period of say 10 years or whatever, and we call the shots on everything that you do, which can obviously feel very stifling to an artist today, because it goes back to who you're working with. If you're working with a label that truly understands your music and understands how to position and promote your music, then you're definitely in a very good position. But if maybe you are working with some of the traditional bigger labels, I'm not sure if, honestly, if that's the best fit for you. If you are having a conversation with somebody who doesn't necessarily understand where your music fits into the larger scheme of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're sitting and giving up, say, your rights over not just your masters, you're giving up your rights on, any kind of publishing, which anyway, I mean, again, I'm divided about, because I don't know how structure our publishing sort of environment is in India, to be
It
very,
isn't
very
really,
honest.
yeah.
It isn't. Yeah, exactly. I feel like efforts are being made, but we've still got a long way to go. But even that aside, suppose you're giving up all your rights in, especially your new media and digital sort of rights, depending on what, your platforms basically, and your mediums that extend beyond what we understand as tradition.
Yeah.
You're giving up so much potentially to somebody who doesn't necessarily understand. So I feel like checking out what rights and what mediums you're giving up things for is something very, very important to understand. I think something else also to sort of look at through your agreement would be how often your approval is actually going to be sought when, which, obviously that's the thing. I mean, ultimately, I think a fair deal is one where the artist is going to be involved as much as possible. And that's the thing. I think an artist should make a very informed decision of whether or not they want to go ahead with a deal like that if their approval is not being sought wherever they think is necessary, And I think, again, from a very, very practical point of view, I mean, this is like an old school thing, but labels tend to want to sign you up for album cycles.
Yeah.
But maybe you as an indie artist would prefer a time cycle, because if things aren't really working out, you can get out faster. So so the difference basically between an album cycle and a time cycle is that a time cycle will say, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, exactly. But an album cycle obliges you to stick around with somebody for as long as you have finished 1 or 2 albums. And we all know that
that could take
forever.
Years,
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and the other thing which I've come across is I've had these, young artists, people who've just come out of college, they've just started working on their new EP, and they're just like, I want to pitch my music to a record label. I want to do this. I want to start out with a record label.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Somehow, I think in today's day and age, I think it's always easier to have the upper hand, to have the music out and then get picked by a record label, as opposed to approaching a record label without anything to show, that you have something out. And I think it's easier for them to get into a bad deal if they do something like that.
Absolutely. And I think it's also just as important to emphasize the fact that signing up with a label doesn't mean you've made it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many self-managed, self-published, self-administered, independent, like artists who are independent to the name independent, to the core. And they are doing so well.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other thing also. I feel like, it's important to understand why you want to put music out, and then who your audience is, where do they live, like which platforms are they on. And for this, maybe you don't need a label, maybe you need, a manager or a PR person or, somebody else. So I think it's important that artists also sort of, and not just artists, I think even we as mentors as well, like we also sort of embrace the fact that there are other innovative ways to do business. There are more stakeholders than what we're used to. So
but in that same context, so how do record labels stay relevant in a situation like this? Because it makes things that much tougher, right? Like how in this digital era where you don't really have physical records being sold anymore, so what position, how do they position themselves? It's not just as producing an album, but promoting it and the kind of investment that they have in an artist. So how do they stay relevant?
So I think that honestly, it boils down to it really does boil down to how well they understand the market that they want to, for the artist that they're representing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, see, legally speaking, I think that, and maybe I am a little biased because I do tend to be very creative first. I
Mm-hmm.
largely represent
Yeah.
creators and artists and musicians, basically. So I'm usually on this side of the table, and then the label will be on the other side.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm.
which already, it definitely does influence the way in which I articulate things and I think about things.
Mm.
But I do believe that labels need to start being a lot more interactive with the artists, in the sense that it's not just about, okay, we've signed them on and now we're done. So,
Mm.
like you said, they do have to do a certain amount of work to
Mm.
have them on board.
Mm.
And in terms of relevance, I think that, I mean, we kind of saw this a few years ago, and I feel like maybe the term never stuck, but that is
Yeah.
kind of what it is. But I mean, we've been seeing 360 deals in all different kinds of forms
Yeah.
anyway,
Oh
you know?
God.
Yeah, exactly.
360.
Exactly. And the thing is, I feel like, I mean, that, I feel like a 360 deal again will work if you have somebody who understands what they're doing, you know?
Yeah.
Because if you, for example, if you've signed on somebody who, primarily performs a lot of jazz,
Mm.
and, I don't know, electro pop jazz or something, and then you sort of throw them into a completely different market, and
Mm.
promote them to something and push, push, push. And I mean, I don't know if that's something that's
Gonna
necessarily
work.
going to work. Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that even listeners are, I mean, audiences are so much more aware and sophisticated,
Yeah.
like we actually don't, and I'm somebody who genuinely enjoys a lot of pop music,
Yeah,
but
same here. I mean,
yeah,
I listen to everything, like from
exactly.
Tamil
Yeah,
to Bollywood to jazz to rock
absolutely.
to.
Yeah,
It's good music for me.
it's all good. Yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. So, but that's the thing, I mean, I won't listen to something just because, somebody has asked me to do it. Like
Mm.
something has to click,
Yeah, yeah, because
that's the
it's
thing.
personal, right? So,
Absolutely, absolutely.
and
And
I
sorry,
think
sorry.
that's also like, for example, there was this. I had read something about how John Mayer
Hmm.
kind of lost his way in the middle because his label got him to sing stuff. He got him. They got him into a genre which it wasn't his style at all, and he
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
completely disappeared from the scene because of that.
absolutely,
Like I
absolutely.
think he started singing country or something. It wasn't his scene at all.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that we've seen that with so many artists. Like, unfortunately, labels have earned a pretty bad reputation over the years also because
Yeah,
they have been intrusive,
yeah.
They've definitely been intrusive. Like, I believe the same thing happened with artists like, do you remember years ago there was this young pop singer who went by the name of Jojo?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So,
Oh God, yeah. You
yeah,
remember
it,
Jojo? That's great.
yeah,
He used
absolutely.
to. He had like sunglasses. I know that he used to wear sunglasses in his videos.
That's yeah. I maybe we're actually getting them confused. I wonder about that.
You're talking
But
about the Indian guy, right?
I am talking about no. I'm talking about this young girl who was basically like an American pop artist. Like she
Okay,
was
then
like
you're talking about two
14
completely
or
different.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
that's
There was
why
an there was
only
an
what
Indian pop artist called Jojo, by the
that's
way.
also crazy. That's also crazy. My goodness. Okay, so
Yeah,
I must know about the Indian pop artist from you.
yeah.
But
I'll send you YouTube links.
yes, please. Yes. On a side note, of course. But with this particular, with this girl, basically, she sort of erupted on the pop scene. She was a whatever, like a very great. Like she was really good. Great is maybe
Talented, yeah.
pushing it, but she
Mm.
was really good. She was a really good vocalist.
Mm.
And the thing is, she just suddenly like disappeared, because like all of a sudden she was gone. And
Mm.
the thing is that now she's kind of become very public about the fact that her label actually was the reason why she didn't get a chance, because she signed on to a big label
Oh
and
God.
they purposely sort of kept delaying. And see, she was signed on probably for album cycles,
Mm.
and they
Yeah,
never let her release her albums because
yeah.
they had other artists on their roster that they wanted to push.
Oh God, that's the worst
Yeah,
when they do that. It's
exactly.
just
And
it's
she
just in
finally, like,
bad
her
faith.
contract. Exactly, exactly. And then her contract finally broke, and now she's sort of trying to make a comeback. And it's a good, like, I mean, I heard JoJo when I was 15, so it has been 15 years at least. And with
Now
that,
we
I
all
will,
know how old you are.
yeah, at least that's where I leave things up for the mystery of calculation. But no, I do feel like, I feel like labels have to sort of reinvent themselves as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What are you offering to the artist that the artist can't do themselves now?
I know.
That's what it
And I know a lot of people come up with, we'll push you into playlists, we'll, do this, we'll promote you on
Yeah,
all these other private playlists. But then I realized I know musicians myself
exactly.
who've done it completely DIY. And they have
Absolutely.
gotten themselves on Spotify playlists and Apple playlists and on sheer, like, talent, sheer talent.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's the thing, I mean, first of all, there's nothing beats organic growth. Nothing beats it,
Yeah, nothing beats it.
Yeah, and I feel like that's especially something that needs to be reiterated in this like social media heavy, age of
Mm.
promotion, because you can buy promotion, but it just won't be the same as organic growth at the end
Yeah.
of the day. And like you rightly mentioned, there are a lot of artists who have who are very talented and who have also educated themselves on what works.
Mm. Yeah.
They've really learned how to understand who their audiences are.
Mm.
Where their audiences want to listen to them. For example, just because just because there are artists who do really well on YouTube doesn't mean that every artist is going to do well on YouTube.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's important, it's very important. And I feel like the reason why this is important also to understand is because, as you know, a lot of this gets contractually captured as well, in a deal,
mm.
because this is what I meant when I
Mm.
was talking about, sort of other mediums as well, other
Yeah.
mediums where how you control where a release happens,
Yeah.
where that promotion happens. And I feel like all of this needs to, like, there needs to be a lot more homework and a lot
Yeah.
more reimagining, especially now. Yeah.
So, so now in this, uh, given that you mentioned contracts, I'm curious about coffee for contracts. I know what it is. I think, and it's a great campaign. Like, I think it's amazing that you're doing something like that. And I want to know, I want to understand what exactly you're doing with it, and how often do you have it, and who are you targeting? Who are the people who can come and approach you for this coffee for contracts?
So it started off honestly on
Hmm.
on another very hot summer afternoon in Hyderabad, and
Okay.
yeah, I think the heat must have done something, but no, but it was honestly one thing that sort of is very, very important to me, which I hope to continue to bring into my work also with artistic licenses: accessibility. It's a
Mm.
very, very important thing to me, because I always want to make sure that, I make services or information as accessible as they can be.
Yeah.
Deem, and even when it comes to, I think this is definitely true for the kind of uh, contracts that come out, the whatever work that I'm sort of involved in. I try to keep the language as direct and simple as possible,
Mm.
because again, as Sandhya, we don't need complicated language to convey
Yeah.
something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need that at all. It's
Like a
just
15-page contract for something that can be done
yeah.
in 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's no need. There's really no need to get super verbose about stuff.
Yeah.
So honestly, I feel like when it comes to accessibility, of course, there's so many different things that one has to keep in mind. And one of the things that I've always questioned is why artists don't find, especially independent artists, why are they so hesitant to seek legal counsel?
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that I wondered was, is it, economic
Cost.
accessibility? Because, yeah, for sure, because
And it is. It
it is.
definitely.
It is 100%. It absolutely is, because I mean, seeking specialized counsel of any kind,
Mm.
legal or otherwise, obviously costs you money. And of course, I did wonder whether that was a hindrance of some kind.
Mm.
So I literally thought to myself, okay, so what if that was taken out of the equation? Then what would happen? I
Mm.
mean, would people sort of be a bit more receptive? Would we finally be able to like actually identify other issues? So honestly, that's kind of what made me think of Coffee for Contracts as a project. I literally put out a call. I think this is in in July of, it's a 2-year-old project. So I think this was in the month of July. And what I basically sort of put out there to the community was that if you are an artist or a creative professional,
Mm.
then if you shared your, if you had any kind of legal query, or you had a contract, or you had, anything that's sort of, rights oriented, any kind of legal concern that you had, and you would like to share it with me,
Mm. Mm.
of course, in confidence, for the entire month of July, then I would be happy to have, basically have a look at it, help them with it,
Mm.
basically help you with it, all in exchange for a cup of coffee.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, of course, it's because I wanted coffee. Obviously, that's what all this was
There might
about.
be law firms will be like, Manojna, you're undercutting us. How dare
Ab-
you?
Absolutely.
We charge 45 lakhs for that
Yeah,
contract.
but so then I'd better be a very good cup of coffee. No,
But
but I think the response, like, honestly, for me also, it was because our work is also just as meaningful when we learn more about what the community is up to.
yeah,
you know
exactly. Yeah.
and of course, Sandhya, I mean, again, I'm sure that you will agree with me on this. There's not a lot of dialogue that takes place between the creative community and, say, an entertainment lawyer or an IP lawyer,
Yeah.
again, because of so many different things, because of money, because of, sometimes, unfortunately, people feel like they aren't allowed to ask us questions.
I
you
know.
know
That's so
yeah,
sad though.
it is. It is. Especially, like, I feel like people like us, because we're more than happy to, like, we're
Yeah.
happy to answer questions if they'll answer our questions.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, but one thing which is, I mean, Google research
Mhm.
versus X number
Yeah.
of years of practice, please.
Yeah.
Give
Yeah.
us some
Sure.
credit.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I agree. I agree. And I feel like that's also something that people need to understand, I mean,
Yeah.
even because, even if it's, whether it's coffee for contracts, or whether it's, because I also really enjoy teaching and doing a lot of workshops as well.
Mm, mm.
And I feel like even with those also, like, I'm happy to share what I know,
Yeah.
but I still feel like it's important for people to understand that this is not the same as hiring me as a full-time lawyer for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
know?
Correct.
Because obviously, as you rightly mentioned, there is a lot of knowledge and, investment that even I bring,
Yeah. And effort,
drawing from my
right?
experience. Sorry?
That effort that you've spent, and
Absolutely.
that the fact that you've been doing this for the past 7 to 8 years, the kind of
Absolutely.
experience
Absolutely.
that you have comes at a cost. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm saying as an enabler, there are certain things that you should value from our side as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think this is the reason why, even with Coffee for Contracts, also, I do sort of provide a disclaimer. I sort of say
Yeah.
that, look, folks, I'll do like a preliminary thing for you.
Yeah.
And if you'd like, and it's an opportunity for them also,
Yeah.
if they feel like, oh, okay, talking to a lawyer isn't so bad, maybe I
Yeah.
actually like engage them. So there have been
Yeah.
some conversions. I would
Yeah.
say that every person I've spoken to has converted,
Yeah.
which I'm completely happy with.
Mm.
Some people have converted into long-term clients, which has been wonderful.
Mm.
Some people have just become great industry.
Associates. Yeah.
Absolutely, because even I now have somebody to ask questions,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like get answers from,
Um,
So it was honestly, it was really motivated from this idea of, I'd like to meet new people in the scene.
mm. Well, that I thought that was an exceptionally brilliant idea. I was just like,
Oh,
great,
thank you.
she gets free coffee and can do
Yes.
these contracts.
Yeah, and
So
some people have been super sweet. Huh? I mean, some people like have sweetened me coffee. I'm like, yo, that's really nice. Thank you.
so cute.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Mm.
it's like you said, the kind of people that I've met, the kind of work that I've done with them and for them. It's just been I've learned so much,
Yeah,
and also being married to a musician makes things. I'm seeing things from a very different perspective because
of
I'm
course. Yeah.
seeing that life day to day, and
Right.
the kind of the interaction with other musicians, the problems that they face, and
Absolutely.
having that access to that industry, knowing how that industry works from the artist perspective.
Mhm.
Also, I think it helps me understand what they're looking for from in a better light.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the intentions are also very different when you're a musician who is putting your music out there versus being commissioned to work on a project.
Yeah.
versus maybe somebody, who is part of the industry, so to say, the
Mm.
film industry, so to say.
Mm.
So you're allowed to be a part of all three,
Yeah.
but we all have to acknowledge that everybody has different motivations and intentions behind each of them. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm. So, I mean, what is your, like, what advice do you have for, both musicians and for lawyers who are looking to get into to the music industry? Because we've realized that this is a niche practice area, but there have been a lot of people who are actually expressing interest, and I want to tell them, as much as I want to encourage you to get into this,
Yeah.
don't rely on it as your only source of income, because it
Mhm.
doesn't pay as much. I mean, it's
Mhm.
a different thing working with the um, industry, so to say, like the entertainment industry where you're working with large labels. That's great. I mean,
Mhm.
if they do pay you on time, you're lucky.
Mhm.
I think, and this is a conversation that I had with Priyanka as well, but
Mhm.
the entertainment industry as such for lawyers isn't such, it's not like a very high revenue
Mhm.
source, but there's so much of work, it's a niche area, and there's so much of opportunity over there. So
Absolutely.
what is your, like, what would your advice be to, young upcoming lawyers?
Okay.
And also
Um,
the musicians, by the way.
of course, of course. So I think I will actually maybe start off with lawyers and law students, I suppose, who are very interested
Mm,
in getting into this space, because I agree with you. I think that that's been the most fascinating thing, because back when I started Artistic License, which is 2013.
mm.
Um, I would have to listen to really bad jokes like, "Oh, you're an entertainment lawyer. Are you entertaining? Ha 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 ha."
Oh God.
Yeah, I agree. I don't talk to those people anymore.
Good for you.
Yes, I have. Yeah, I've definitely Brené Browned myself and
Mm,
drawn my boundaries, so to say.
mm, mm,
Um, but I feel like honestly, I think that what you did mention is correct in the sense that it is an area where there is a lot of opportunity to do a lot of good work.
mm,
Um, I think that honestly, I feel like the thing about something like entertainment law is that you have to be aware of what you're getting into and who you
yeah,
want to work with.
yeah, yeah.
So as you said, I mean, if you're working with the industry or you're working in a firm, then your revenue is going to look very different, undoubtedly.
Mm,
But the nature of your work will also look very different. you
mm,
know and obviously along with that, the kind of sort of work culture that you have, etc., will also look very different.
mm,
um, I feel like when you're working with independent artists in the independent community, so I've been fortunate enough to say that for the most part,
mm,
money has not been an issue for me. But I must qualify that statement also by saying that my overheads are something that I keep to the bare minimum. And I've
mm,
done that very, very consciously,
mm,
because I have not wanted to transfer those costs to my clients.
mm, mm,
So, and I think that that's important for young lawyers to know, because, for example, artistic license is, it's super duper streamlined. I, pretty much work with other consultants on a case to case basis. I do not have an office,
mm,
which I am very, very happy about. I really, really, yeah. I mean, even pre all of this, I was a big advocate of home offices. And I actually do work much better in a home office. So I have a home office in Hyderabad. I work out of a home office in Bangalore as well.
So you've
Uh,
been WFH before this whole
oh
thing.
yeah, before it was called
Before, yeah.
WFH. Yeah. When it was just called, "Oh, you're working from home. Okay, that must be so nice." Yeah, no. So yeah, I think that those are important things to understand, because we also tend to equate entertainment law with being a very glamorous thing, and it's not always.
It's
It's
not
still.
at all.
Yeah, exactly. Because at the end of the day, we're not trying to be celebrities. We're trying to be the lawyers.
Yeah.
You know?
And
So
being representing people, right?
absolutely, absolutely. And it's the same thing even for if you are working in the independent space as well. I mean, you might have gotten interested in this because you are artistically inclined or
Yeah.
creatively inclined.
Yeah.
But then you have to remember that if you want to be a good lawyer for an artist, then you have
Mm,
to be their lawyer. You can't be their manager. You
yeah.
can't be their backup singer. You can't be,
Who is
there
the
are,
backup singer, Manojna?
yeah, I know,
I want to
seriously. I
know.
mean, I don't know what era my brain is like stuck in, but yeah, clearly I've betrayed some of my interests over there. But yeah, I feel like this is also important,
Yeah,
like you need
yeah.
to sort of, yeah, and and then make intelligent choices, when it comes to the, have good expectations, like set your
Yeah.
expectations
Set
a little.
expectations.
Yeah. Like I've definitely benefited from that, and
Mm,
honestly that also has happened because, like you rightly mentioned, I've taken the time, I've put in the time,
mm,
so I've put in the time, I've really understood and learned a lot from a lot of freelance musicians in the
mm,
community, in the scene.
mm,
So I not only understand what their price points are, you
mm.
know but I also understand what their needs are. I understand who is collaborating with who and why this is, of interest. So I feel like choose your lane, like pick your lane, and then try and sort of learn on the job. Definitely take an active maybe even get a master's. I'm one of those few people. I say few people because unfortunately I don't think a lot of people feel like they benefited from their masters, but I am definitely one of those people who genuinely, like, I'm so
Yeah,
grateful for having done my masters because it really influenced and impacted the way I do things. But I think that
definitely.
that's the thing, like, don't get into it because it's like glamorous and sexy, because it's not.
Yeah. I
It's
mean, it's
really
not
not.
just about, yeah, because people think that, and I also realized that they look at it in a very different light in terms of
Yeah.
how people perceive entertainment lawyers here as
Yeah.
opposed to how people perceive entertainment lawyers abroad.
Yeah.
Two
Yeah.
completely different, I mean, the buckets, I think, because there
Absolutely. Yeah.
the attorneys are at the top of the chain in the sense
Yes,
nothing
exactly.
happens without them signing off. Here,
Correct.
getting the artist to get comfortable with lawyers itself is a big deal. But I think,
Yeah.
like you said, things are changing, and
Absolutely.
there's a huge
Absolutely.
opportunity here. People are talking about
Absolutely.
things, and
Absolutely.
with lovely people like yourself spreading
Ah,
the awareness, I think it's just a matter of time.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
very
I think so
grateful to
too.
the internet for that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, I mean, I feel like, especially in the last couple of years, I mean, I've been working on some really, really interesting deals, some really interesting projects,
Mm,
because it's something else when you represent a creator and on the other side is a label or a
mm,
much, much bigger
yeah,
artist,
that's
or a really big software company, for example. So and the interesting thing is that these are people who are looking to collaborate or commission work.
mm,
So it is a very different uh, it's been very interesting, to say the least. Like,
yeah,
I'm really,
full
really,
experience.
yeah, yeah, and I'm smiling now because
Yeah.
I'm genuinely looking forward to what what the future sort of holds, because I think it's actually quite promising.
Okay.
Um, I think coming back to musicians, though, because that is something that you asked me as well, like what
Mm,
I would sort of suggest for them. I think that one very fundamental thing that independent musicians need to start off with is, which we could learn maybe from the industry,
mm.
is to get comfortable talking about money.
Yeah.
I think that that's where we should start, honestly,
Know
because
your worth.
yeah, exactly. Once that clarity has been achieved, you automatically start understanding that you're worth this much, that your time is worth this much, that your rights are worth this much, and that's when we can really start playing. That's when
Mm,
we can get into the game, so to say.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think industry people should be a lot more welcoming of innovation. Yeah, they're still
Yeah.
kind of stuck in the dark ages.
I know that is this whole formula music. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not saying that formula music is bad. I
yeah,
understand the logic
yeah,
behind it, but it's just
yeah.
stop doing this remake of 90 songs. No, like, come
Yeah,
on, get
yeah. I
on with
mean,
it.
I
There are
feel like,
so many creative musicians and like with
correct.
good style and talent. There's so much.
Yeah.
Give
I
them a
feel like
chance.
I feel like this is where a lot of the OTTs have been disruptive,
Yeah,
because they've
exactly.
sort of, yeah, they've stepped in and now
Yeah,
suddenly they want independent musicians
yeah,
to compose for them,
yeah, 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 yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
And again, because of these OTTs, the musicians are slowly also, getting aware on getting aware of these contracts that are coming, and they want to
Absolutely.
know what are the rights that they're giving away.
Absolutely.
I definitely like to recommend that, don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
just because you're going for that 75,000 that you're getting for that song, don't give away your,
Absolutely.
all
Yeah.
rights to that song. Like,
Absolutely.
you need to retain a few things. And it's always, I mean, since we have now, people know that, okay, there are a few people talking about this. They have that awareness that, okay, there is something called moral rights. There is something
Correct.
called,
Yeah.
derivative works. So that's good. I'm glad that conversation has started.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with you there. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, yeah, thank you so much. I think that brings us to the end of today's episode. But it's been,
Thank you.
we need to have this conversation even otherwise. There's so much to connect
Absolutely.
over,
Absolutely.
and, Nalsa's stories to swap.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I feel like we should have a completely different, maybe we don't make that one public, but
Yeah.
but we just
Sure.
have our conversation.
Just
Of
our
course.
conversations on,
Course.
Nalsa Goss.
Of course. Of course.
And so, thank you all so much for tuning in. If any of you want to have a further chat with Manojna, reach out to me, or you can check her out on her website, artisticlicense.org. Thank you so much for tuning in. That's all for today.